All right, everybody, welcome to Summer of Shipping Week 10. We've got a pretty exciting week today because we have a special guest. And so Shawn Wang will be joining us, or he actually has joined us, and we'll be giving a little talk on his background, and we'll have a chance to pepper him with some questions. So a pretty exciting week for Summer of Shipping. So last week we had week 9, and we did a little talk about pragmatic HTTP, some basic topics and things to kind of help people get a engineer's level at just HTTP stuff. We did some exercises, learned about cores, looked at cookies, some DNS, and that's just kind of what we did last week. This week, we're going to have a Q&A with Swyx, also known as Shawn. And we will first talk about some housekeeping stuff before we turn it over to him. So that's all pretty exciting. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I always do at the beginning of every presentation is I just kind of refresh our objectives for the summer, remember where we came from and what we're focused on. So I've kind of reworded some of the text a little bit. So at first I was calling it Get Noticed, but now I'm calling it just Get the Interview. It's much more down to the focus of what we're trying to do. So the first part is getting the interview, and there's two ways that we think about doing that. One is being a traditional resume. Another one is via a public resume. The second thing that we're aiming to do is helping you pass the interview, and so that's where the interview prep practice is coming along, and so we give a little update on that as well. And finally, we want to help raise your job skills. So these are all things that a traditional internship would help you with, and what we want to be able to do is help out with that a little bit. This week in particular, I think what we're going to be able to discuss with Shawn, we're really going to be able to dive into that public resume. I don't know there are many people who've done it better than him. And so that's really amazing to be able to have him here with us and just kind of guide us through that process, as well as maybe asking about job skills and things that can help on the job. So he's going to be a wealth of information right here. And so we'll be able to dive into that in just a moment. So quick announcements on study groups. I made a post earlier this week about who was interested in just forming study groups, and quite a few of you were interested in forming a study group for data structures and algorithms. Another good group were interested in the book Designing Data-Intensive Applications. And then finally, there was about 12 of you who were interested in ML. So we'll have more details to follow, but the big thing I want to talk about is for those who are interested in data structures and algorithms, I'm thinking of actually joining forces with the interview prep. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But for all of these, more details to follow. And so you can kind of expect some kind of way to organize around these. So for our interview prep, I want to give a big shout out to Pedro and John. They've done an amazing job of just kind of leading this. Pedro has kind of just started it and kind of focused on PM type questions, and John has been helping us out with the more algorithm type questions. People are getting lots of practice, which is really great. But the big thing that John is looking for right now is figuring out how to tailor some of his preparation and talks that he gives, and how to help people with the algorithms and data structures that they want to learn. So if you fill out this form, actually, while I'm at it, I am going to post it in the Discord. Oh, actually, I'm going to post it in the Discord so that everybody can comment on it or get to it. And so if we go to general, it's now in general. So that's for interest form for SOS interview preps, algorithm kind of presentations. And if you're interested and you want to join us, they happen on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. So same time as right now, but on Tuesdays. And that's when we prepare for the interview prep stuff. So I'm going to full screen this again. All right, and the other thing I want to call out is the demo list. So this is where we were at the, before last week, and then after last week, we had a few changes. So, so thank you to Theodora, Jason, Michael, and Vishnu for demoing 3 new people on the list, and it grows. So the goal is to get this list to be, we have to force us to use smaller fonts and more columns. That's what we want, and that would be a very successful demo list. So very excited to see it grow, and hopefully if you have a demo this week, we'll do it at the end. But if we have no demos, that's totally okay. We'll use that extra time for more questions. And that turns it over to Shawn. So very, very short, brief intro. So at the start of summer, we talked about learning and building in public. And I want to kind of take us back, throw back to from week 0. So week 0, we there was a slide that I put into just the very beginning, and we actually referenced something that Shawn talked about, and it's from his article "Learn in Public," and we talked about the one quote that I really pulled from him is "Make the thing that you wish you had when you were learning," and that was something that we really wanted to be kind of a guiding principle. We talked about some of these concepts from David Perel, and he was kind of quoting Patrick O'Shaughnessy, and so we're kind of inspired by these topics. But what's pretty crazy is, we referenced a quote from Shawn, and quite magically, he's here today. And so I'm going to do a very, very quick brief intro, and then I'm going to turn it over to him. He's got some slides, and we'll be able to ask him a bunch of questions afterwards, and then just kind of have a free-flowing discussion. And then I will check to see if anybody has a demo that they want to give around the 50-minute mark of the hour. And if there is, we'll go to demos, but if not, we'll continue with questions. So a little bit about Shawn. What better way than just to make sure that you've seen his Twitter profile. So he just published a book called Coding Career Handbook. And so if you are interested in getting more advice from him, I definitely recommend it. I have a copy myself, and I can vouch that it is very, very good content. Right now, he is working on the AWS Amplify product. So if you're not familiar, I think, well, I'll let Shawn describe it, but my understanding is kind of like a backend as a service type product from Amazon. And previously he was at Netlify and 2 Sigma. And so with that, I will turn it over to Shawn to give a much better introduction than I can do of his background. And I'll stop sharing and let him say hi.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, AWS Amplify. Hi, everyone. That was an awesome intro, and I honestly don't know what to say to that. I feel like this is slightly embarrassing for me to talk about. AWS Amplify is basically Amazon's third attempt at a JavaScript SDK. There have been 2 prior attempts. We don't talk about them anymore. And we're just trying to make AWS easier to use for people who make front-end web apps. And it turns out there's a lot of them. Because historically AWS has been for backend, focused people. And if you didn't, the whole idea is that it should be easy to use, and then it should degrade nicely into the raw component AWS services for more power. Because obviously nothing scales on earth like AWS. And the trickiness is to preserve that power, but also make it more usable for front-end developers. That's kind of the whole gist. And we can go into more details after that, but I'm here in my personal capacity. Yeah, I just wanted to share some slides. I've done a version of this talk before, so I'm just going to skim over just because I just had the slides ready. A little bit about my background. I used to work in finance for 6 years, and then I burned out and decided to change careers. Did not have a CS degree. So I spent all 2017 basically learning to code. The first half of it, I was doing free code camp on nights and weekends. And then I did a boot camp towards the second half. Then I joined 2 Sigma in 2018. That turned out to not be such a great employer. So I jumped to Netlify, and now I'm at AWS. I also teach React, TypeScript, and Node.js on Egghead. I am a moderator on the r/React.js subreddit. So if you're interested in React and front-end web development, that's definitely my jam. So also I also helped to organize the Svelte community, and I wrote that Learn in Public essay. So I think an orientation around coding careers, like the realization I had when I was writing that book was essentially that a lot of resources are point in time focused. Like you have some resources for like learning to code. That's a point in time. Then you have a lot of resources for like cracking a coding interview. You have a lot of resources for job hunt, the tech resume, whatever. You have some resources for like your first job. Nothing for junior to senior. You have some resources for being senior. You have some resources for being staff. I wanted something that kind of spanned time, because there's a lot of gap in between a lot of these like point in time resources. So the way I thought about it was that you should be equipped with principles, which are like sort of always on default decision rules that generally work over time. Strategy, which are like ways to make one-off big decisions, and then tactics, which are skills that you use like quite repeatedly over the course of your career. So that's the kind of thing I was trying to go for. And so instead of point in time, I was just kind of tilting it and trying to study and make something useful for the long term. And then I think probably this part is the most useful for this audience, which is an inspection of like where you want to be in the stack and how you want to, what kind of career you want to pursue. So I kind of break down, everyone who codes, like how can you sort them? How can you sort the entire universe? And then that's a ridiculous question to even try to answer, but I actually did it. It was pretty funny because it kind of just all fell in place. If you are familiar with the OSI model, which is like applications and all the way down to network stack and all that, you can actually think about similar, like that's how data goes between machines. You can actually think about a similar stack of humans, like from humans who deal closest with the machines and humans who deal closest with end users. And you might naively talk about this as back end versus front end, but really, there's different layers of that. And in fact, back end people are probably closer to creating services, and then front end people are probably closer to creating applications. But then you also have people who like just work on cloud or just work on embedded devices or operating systems. And these are all legitimate software careers, right? Like, and I think the main insight for me when doing this was realizing that like, why is it that, some jobs, so when I was interviewing, for example, I interviewed at Google, and I noticed that, I interviewed at a few places, and I noticed that only Google still does the traditional whiteboard interviews. And I realized that the reason they do that is because they might drop you in somewhere here in their Google is like a generalist software engineering sort of role, and they might drop you in somewhere lower level. And the lower level you go, the more resource constrained you are, and therefore the more strength of the algorithms that you actually need. Whereas in other roles, for example, if I was interviewing at an agency, they don't care about any of this because they all just take it as a given, and they just care about how quickly can you build applications. So those are the kinds of things that you kind of think about, like the kind of role that you interview for has different sets of interview practices based on what they want you to work on, and it's very deterministic. Actually, if you think about like, what are you really doing? So I think the vast majority of us are going to be here, applications and services. Some people might do content stuff, but that's not the area of traditional programmers. This is more for like sort of business analysts and no code users. And then some of you might want to go down the stack, but you start to have very different interview questions, and I think that's a distinction that is underappreciated in interview prep resources. Okay, so the other thing about this is just like this is called the birthday problem, or just like straight math. So Haseeb Qureshi, there's a typo there. Haseeb Qureshi also is a very successful sort of I guess bootcamp grad going into Airbnb. So his story is pretty well known. Well, so in his sort of like how to find a job essay, he talked about this, where like if you have a 4% chance of getting any offer, you you compound that 50 times, you actually have an 87% chance of getting one offer. So definitely is on some level a numbers game, in the sense that on any particular application, like even if you are Google quality, Google actually emphasizes having false negatives rather than false positives. So they will, even if you like actually are basically there, they may just reject you and they may accept you the next time you come around with no change, just because there's a high randomness to a lot of these interviewing. So basically, in order to get a job, you should interview multiple times. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but it does compound quite a lot as you sort of go up. So hopefully that's a little bit encouraging. But I think some people definitely go too far. So in my research, some people go as high as 200 to 300 interview opportunities, applications, and that's exhausting. I don't know how to do that. In my personal job search for my first job, I only applied to 9 opportunities, and I think the spread shot versus the focused approach is a trade-off that you have to make. in a sense of okay, obviously more applications equals higher probability, but then you also spread thin, and you might do a worse job of each application. And I think for me, I preferred the focused approach, because the more research I could do into each one, the higher chance I could get the job, and the more likely that I would want the job that I got, because a lot of times, like, the job that you get actually it helps you determine the next job and the next job, right? Like, so there's some path dependence towards your first job. Not to like put too much pressure on you, but there is a little bit. In terms of like the job hunt, I spent about 2.5 months on that, but some people spend up to a year. So a lot of motivation and discipline comes into play, and I found something that's really helpful was to do stand-ups, like having social pressure, like a group like this is very helpful. For me, I had my bootcamp grad group, and literally every week we just did a stand-up of like, I put in these applications here, I think these other things are sort of like halfway through, or like, I had a good interview today, that's what I did, or I had a bad interview, let's sort of retroactive review these interviews, and I think that's helpful, like saying what you'll do to people that you like, exploits your predisposition to do the things that you said you're going to do. A lot of people, when you only make promises to yourself, you might sort of let yourself down, and you feel fine with it. But if you make promises to other people, that may be like a nice sort of social exploit to force you to do stuff that might be uncomfortable, might be, facing rejection is always uncomfortable. Even the chance of rejection is uncomfortable. But, if you have to do it, you might also get some friends to help you out. Then the other thing that I think that's not really talked about is like day to day, what do you do during the job search? You cannot you cannot look for opportunities 24/7. So actually, the way I split it out was 2 to 3 hours of algorithms a day, because that's the max I could ever take. And I use sites like Algo Expert, LeetCode, Interview Cake, that kind of stuff. Don't go too crazy. The maximum algorithm interview is only 45 minutes. So in that time, you can't even write a heap sort properly. I mean, maybe you could, but then you would not have time for anything else. I don't even think anyone actually tests you on a heap sort. But you might want to like memorize some like big O numbers cold, so that you save some time for other stuff. And then 1 to 2 hours of job opportunity hunting, and that's maybe like trawling job boards, reaching out through networks and stuff. 2 to 3 hours of like more structured courses on books on key skills. Like for me, that was like going deep on JavaScript, going deep on CSS, like focusing on like the real technical details, like the way. So I always sort of make this analogy. So beginners need the quickest way from zero to sort of hello world, right? Getting started. They need like a get started in 5 minutes thing. Advanced people just need the diffs between like, I already knew what's in the latest version, or what's in the previous version. Give me what's new in the latest version, and then I'm good, right? That's the big difference between beginner and advanced. Intermediate people, which you are, need to know all the gaps. And the problem is you don't know what you don't know. And the best way to fix that is to go through books and structured content, which have been curated for you by instructors, right? And just literally go through and see, like, look out, be on the lookout for anything you don't know. You might repeat some stuff that you already do know, but just fast forward through that. And then the last bit is just for me, it's just to build projects, and that's a lot of like side project building. I think that's what this I guess what this summer shipping is about. I don't really know what you're building, but I found that really helpful, especially cloning open source projects, which we'll get into a little bit later. Job hunt. Yeah, I also wanted to emphasize that I guess a lot of people focus on portfolios. I think portfolios are useful for people who are focusing on visually interactive roles. If you're focusing on like a more back-end role, then a portfolio isn't that interesting actually. And what matters more is actually proof of work. And that can be just down to a blog. And that's why writing is so powerful, because it's so malleable. It can just demonstrate whatever you want. And that's really great. So this is Mecca Okereke. He's a engineering manager at Google as well. And so he was like, yeah, you can impress most of us with only three things. Something simple, like one class, just like make it perfect. Something complete, like a small app with like tests and docs, and then something with a story. So this is going to be the hardest for you because you don't have much of a employment story around this yet. But you could have something with regard to open source where you contribute to something that is major. That is well known in the ecosystem, and that's a good enough story as well. Or you could do a talk around, or you could like do a talk around a repo, and that's your story. Anything like that, where it's like non-trivial. It's something that you could tell, as part of an interview, and that really fuels your interestingness, and it sets you apart as someone unique. If you're interested in the cloud, like working on serverless and sort of cloud, I guess public cloud or backend infrastructure as a service companies, definitely pick up on Forrest Brazil's Cloud Resume Challenge. Just Google this Cloud Resume Challenge, and you'll see what he does. He basically offers, if you can complete the set of tasks that he lays out for you, he's going to offer you his network to hire you. I think that's a very fair deal. Okay, so then we'll talk about referrals. If you can get referrals, obviously try to go for referrals because you skip a few steps in terms of interviewing. This is from Jersley Oros, who's an engineering manager at Uber. Oh yeah, okay. I didn't memorize my transitions for my slides. Okay, then you can check. Oh yeah, Twitter is actually particularly helpful. It is our version of LinkedIn. Forget LinkedIn. Just go onto Twitter. And if you can pitch yourself in one tweet, that is actually very helpful. So by the way, I'm going to share my slides. I forgot to share my slides before I started, but I'm going to share my slides so you'll have access to all of these. But if you can pitch yourself in one tweet, then that people can help you just by retweeting it and get you some exposure. And a lot of junior engineers have gotten their jobs just from this one self-pitch type of thing. So something like this. Veni Kunche has a thread with a lot more other pitch tweets, like pitch yourself in 280 characters, and that's super helpful. So definitely try and do that. Okay, interviewing. Here's just some resources. I'm not even going to go through all of them. Just we can talk about them if you need to, but I'm just not going to waste time on that. My book actually focuses more on junior to senior dev. Like I assume you're junior, and then I'll take you to senior. I have like a ton more slides on this, but I'm already skipping those. But like I've done a bunch of research, and we can also talk about that if you're interested in that. And the whole goal for me is to like write down tacit knowledge. Like people, this is explicit knowledge is the stuff that you can find in books, and that has been written down. Tacit knowledge is the stuff that you learn on the job, and to some extent cannot be written down because you have to experience it and live through it. But sometimes people just haven't got to it yet. So I think the goal of my writing and hopefully the goal of your writing is to find out what hasn't been written down, but everybody knows, everybody, air quotes, right? Because there's definitely people who don't know it. And it's valuable because you earn it through hard-won experience and you write it down. And you can grow that pie of explicit knowledge, and people will be very appreciative of you. So I find this concept of tacit knowledge very helpful. Principles. I got this idea from Ray Dalio, who sort of lives his lives by principles, and that's a way. It's like kind of like a decision tree for your mind and your life. And it's a way of encoding lessons that you learn into just things that you always do, so you don't make mistakes again, and you sort of reflect on your mistakes and you grow as a result of them. So for mine, I think everyone here knows that learning in public is the way. This is the thing that I promote. I did not invent it, and it's not mine. It's, for example, I think Phil was quoting, who was it? Someone else. So, Patrick McKenzie. Yeah.
Patrick O'Shaughnessy.
Yeah. And Patrick O'Shaughnessy. Yeah, like everyone, there's a bunch of people. In fact, like the earliest reference to learning public that I've found is from NASA in 2010, where they actually install it as part of their knowledge management principles, like how scientists, like rocket scientists, pass on their knowledge to others is they learn it in public internally within NASA. And so that's a very interesting phenomenon. I think I myself picked it up from Kelsey Hightower, who is sort of Mr. Kubernetes, and then there's just a bunch of other people who all do this. So it's the fastest way to grow your knowledge and your network at the same time, and it turns a lot of your work into inbound opportunities, like through my blogging and whatever. Like the internet exists to scale your intellectual property, and a lot of us are just like so tuned towards trading our time for money, but then not really sort of putting that into reusable capital that can just scale infinitely without us. Like in my sleep, people are reading. I get like 1,000 visitors a day on my site, and I'm making friends without knowing it, and that is hugely compounding over, like, assume like a 40-year career. Just do that over 40 years, you'll get a lot of friends. And I think you don't have to be famous. You just have to be like, you just have to show that you're interested in something, and you're working on something that is cool to you. People will find you, because that's how the internet works. And that's actually one of the reasons I call sort of blogging or whatever proof of work, in the sense that even if not a single soul reads your stuff when you put it out, when someone sits down to interview you, they probably Google you. Like, I've been Googled in front of me during an interview. It's kind of rude. they'll be like, all right, hold on, I'm gonna Google you. And yeah, fortunately, like, I do well in Google, but I think if people can instantly verify that you've like just had sustained interest over something, and you've like put out quality work, because like we know how to tell what's quality and what's not, right? If people can instantly verify that, that's better than any interview. Like, you cannot screw that up, and I think that's very powerful. And so, I'm going to stop gushing about this, but it's really great. I have more principles in the book. Particularly for you guys, I think cloning open source apps is a good idea. The reason I pitched this cloning open source apps idea is that there's a lot of decision making to be done in apps, and if you try to make the next big startup while you're also trying to practice your tech skills, you're just going to get decision fatigue, and you have a high chance of not completing your app. Whereas if you clone something that's already open source, you end with 2 code bases that you can compare, and you can actually learn some real skills on that. And I think that's a very powerful thing. There's more points I make, but that's the gist of it. That for example, if you want to learn React, Ken C. Dodds has an open source app he calls Bookshelf. Go and clone that, and then show it to him at the end. He will give you a code review for free, because like, you've just cloned his thing. He's going to look at it. I did the same thing with Ryan Florence with React Router, and it's these are the, like, I think there are always very underrated ways of getting stuff that you cannot pay for by putting directed effort into someone's project, someone's interests, and just like being a collaborator for a brief period of time with them, and then you become a peer and you become a friend, and it's not that hard. It's so much better on a project level basis than like, hey, if I buy you a drink, will you be my mentor for life? That's a really shitty proposition, and I don't recommend doing that. I think working on projects with things that they are interested in, that you're also interested in, and there's a sort of mutual exchange of knowledge there, I think that's very helpful. Okay, and then strategy. I just want to make you aware that strategy exists, and that you should have some idea of learning strategy and career strategy. I think this is more important when you're sort of in the job already. So we're just going to leave this for later. A lot of people talk about T-shaped employee. I kind of don't think this is super helpful, and I talk a little bit about that. And I also do a study of career ladders, like how you get promoted from level to level within every single public company's career ladder. And we also talk about tech strategy, which is how, like, we also need, like, as engineers, we also need to understand, if we want to have impact and if we want to work on successful projects, we also need to understand how money is made from our software. So, that's where my finance background and my economics background comes in, and I sort of break down more strategy stuff. Again, we can talk about this, but I don't want to take up too much time with this stuff. Finally, tactics. Tactics are just like the more sort of one-off things. I always think that developers want to get better in design. I'm really shitty in design myself, but I'm really focused on picking out small tricks that I can do. Like, I don't want to be a designer, but I also don't want my stuff to suck. And if I can make it easy to like put a little bit more effort than most, then I stand out. So like, things like this, like putting a nice banner, like this took a minute, but it makes everything a lot nicer. Stuff like that, like ways to spark joy, how to write, how to do well on Twitter, how to market yourself. Oh, the marketing yourself bit, I think is also very important. Oh, lampshading. So this one's very important for junior engineers. Basically, there are 2 points in your career, kind of, where not knowing anything is a power. So like people always say knowledge is power, but I think if you invert that and you can say ignorance is power when you're very junior, like people are expected to teach you, and when you're very senior, you're not expected to know the details. So it's a very interesting way of flipping this. Like every weakness can be turned into a strength if you are creative enough and if you know how to pitch yourself and you know what the other counterparty wants. And I think if you can practice that, then it's kind of like this judo move of like, okay, I have this weakness, but if I acknowledge it first, I think, because everyone here is American, most people go to the idea of 8 Mile, right? Like Eminem in his final battle in 8 Mile, he like brought out every single point that his opponent was going to say about him, and he just said it first. That's it. So like now he cannot be criticized because he's already criticized himself, and anything anyone says about you is just going to sound unoriginal. And it's a very powerful thing to lampshade, which is like to hang a lamp on your biggest weakness and just say, I know this is there. What are you going to do about it? Like that's extremely powerful. So I hope that's a skill that you can develop and take with you. How I write, I can talk a little bit more about that if you're interested as well. And then marketing yourself is something that has gotten a lot of interest, and it's something where like you should know that what you build, they won't come immediately. Like you need to be able to sell yourself. Like even if you're the best coder in the world, if no one knows about you, then you're not going to have that much impact. So you need to be able to sort of package yourself up. Like people want to put you in a box, help them put you in a nice box. Otherwise, they'll do it for you and put you in a generic commodity box. So that's the rough idea. And you should market yourself both in public and at work. And then finally, I was always trying to end off, like I want people to, I always want people to have a sustainable approach to their career. So everything that we talked about is like sort of these layers, like outward facing layers of like principles, strategies, and tactics. But I always think like, even if you had the answer to every single question that you always have, why is it that like, knowing the answer doesn't do much for you? Right? Why is it that you fail to pick up on these things? It's because you don't have a system to implement them. You don't have a system to like get your life in order. And I think if you work on that operating system for yourself, for like, I don't know, it goes down to as small as like, are you on top of your emails? Do you make your appointments? Like, are you taking care of your health? Like for me, like I'm failing on a bunch of these small things, but like, understanding and acknowledging that these things matter, like even right down to your emotions. Like, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling stressed? Do you have a process of like coping with it, like a support system, that kind of thing? A lot of more senior engineers actually lose their drive. Like they view coding as a job, and they lose interest in coding because they've just lost that intrinsic motivation. So I think it's very important to keep that fire burning within, to keep your ideas flowing, to work on side projects, and all that cool stuff. Like the way you feel about coding now may not be the same way you feel about it in 20 years. And I think if we can keep our internal motivation towards like what we personally are interested in, I think we can last a lot longer in this industry, because there's a lot of burnout. And that's it that I prepared, but I'm happy to take questions.
Wow, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Shawn. We're getting a lot of comments right now in the chat. People are like, hey, this is amazing. People are clapping. We're going to clap for you now. You can only hear me clapping because I've usually asked everyone to mute. But if we look in the chat, I'll just read a couple. Clap, 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 clap. Very helpful, very helpful.
And I posted my slides in the chat.
Oh, sweet. Okay, so I will take these and I'll post this in the Discord as well, so that there's like a persistent copy. So give me just a second while I do that.
Yeah, I think if anything, like the way I approach these things is to have a framework, right? Like, so what I just did here was to give you like, do you have an answer for each of these things? And if you don't, do you want to? is that something that's important to you? Maybe it's not, right? Like this is my view of the world. But if it is important to you and you don't have an answer, let's start to talk about this. It's a conversation. I'm just sharing my stuff. I don't know either, right? Like I'm a noob just like everyone else. But I think we need to have a way to talk about the big questions, because so much of life is filled with mundane shit that doesn't matter.
100%. Alrighty. So I guess at this time, Shawn, you want to just take some questions? Is that we'll just do that for maybe
Yeah,
like 10,
I don't even know how
15
much time I was left. I
Oh,
was actually
you're
worried about
perfect.
going over.
Perfect. You're perfect. Yeah, I think we'll don't worry about going over. If people need to drop off at the end of the hour, we're still going to be able to record it so we can go after. And we'll do demos. Hey, if anybody wants to do a demo today, just comment in the chat. We'll still have time for demos. But if not, just ask your questions and fire away. And so Samson has a demo. Samson, we'll do demos at the end. So we'll try to save that. I'm thinking we'll do at least 15 minutes of questions, and then maybe we'll do demos. Sounds good? Cool. So we've got a couple small demos. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to first get everybody. Oh, Samson has to leave. All right, Samson, you can do a demo at the 55-minute mark. How about that? And then we'll go to Jason. If anybody has a question, just ask it in the chat. I've got a bunch of questions prepared. And so we'll just kind of work through that if just to kind of buy people time. But just get the gears going and let me go dig up my questions.
I have a actually. What do you think about no code, and how should engineers kind of getting into coding today think about no code?
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Let me share my screen again, because I feel like I have the perfect answer for this. So, how many developers are there in the world? Do you know? So the estimate is 40 to 50 million. That's the number of registered users on GitHub, and we can assume that GitHub has pretty close to 100% capture on developers. And that's about 0.4% of the population, that can code. The demand for software is way more than we can ever accomplish. Like this 0.4% of the population, even if all of them were excellent coders, which they're not, the 0.4% cannot serve the 100%. Like the massive, especially this year, like the huge rise in demand for software of all sorts, like from video conferencing to like remote collaboration to whatever, is just tremendous. And no code is a response to that, right? So I am not completely not threatened by it, because that just means that there's there's more interesting work for the rest of us as coders, and then the more commoditized work goes into sort of no code platforms. And so I always view this as this, like, remember that we are here, the people who code, we make the applications and we make the services. And for people who are interested in like end users content and applications, so like they're kind of focused here, where they kind of color within the boxes that we give them, you know what I mean? And that's fine. They need more lines to color, and that's actually really good for us. Like obviously we hire software engineers to make no code solutions, but then also gives us like nobody should be making like what a typical WordPress, Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, I don't know, whatever, right? No human programmer should be hand making those sites again, like, because you could just pay those guys to do it for you. That's good, because that's very mundane, repetitive work, right? So then our job becomes more interesting. Like we should always focus on the higher value add jobs, and I think it's always the case where the amount of no code solutions has been increasing over time for the past 10, 20 years, and the salaries of software engineers have gone up. So it's completely not threatening.
Sweet. That was actually a question that I had on my list. So thank you, Nick, for just asking that one, getting this knocked off. I do have one question, and I think this is something that's particularly cognizant for just a lot of people, part of SOS. A lot of SOS students, they've actually had their internships canceled, and it's a very just a stressful time. And so my question is along the lines of, so regarding like finding a job and making yourself more marketable, or just like not necessarily marketable, but like having a better resume. How do you find the balance between like the job and learning psychologically? I guess like, you know, you talked about which is really awesome just to have that breakdown by hours during your job hunt. But like in terms of just like that psychological stress where it's like, oh, you know, I feel anxious, I want to do things that will make me, you know, a better candidate versus, oh, I'm actually interested in this. Kind of how do you balance the, how did you first find that balance?
I mean, I think there's a lot of randomness to how you get the job, which is why you shouldn't put your hopes too much in any particular job, and you should work on what I got from my sort of bootcamp founder was that you should work on systems over goals. A goal is something you can reach, but you don't really have control over whether you get it or not, like whether or not you get the job. But a system is like the repeatable process that's entirely within your control. And as long as you kind of do the right thing, you have the faith that eventually it's going to work out for you. So that's why I focus on things like time splits, like doing the stand-ups. Like I don't promise things like I'll get you a job in 2 months. That's, you know, if you read my book, that's a ridiculous goal. But then, and also the other thing that you find out about goals is that you reach them and then you find out you're actually no happier once you reach them. You always want the next thing and the next thing. It's better to have a good system that you can refine over, you know, the entire length of your career. So yeah, I mean, my system is that I learn in public. Like I whatever I'm learning and I try to put out, or I do talks and I do blog posts like that. And yeah, I mean, like I think to some extent, like if you're a student and you're sort of crunched for time, like that's something that you can do when you have the luxury of just like grinding it out for years. I think when you're a student and you're crunched for time, you definitely have to focus a little bit more, which is why I talk about the time split, where you definitely want to, you know, focus on the job hunt, get the social network, social pressure going of like, what are you doing? What do you do this week? What are you going to do tomorrow? And just like having that plan and moving people, you know, for most people, they have like some sort of Trello board, right? Like here's an interesting opportunity, and then you move to like, okay, contacted, okay, first interview, okay, second interview, and then rejected or accepted. Always have movement, right? Like don't get stuck. And I think you will eventually get there. That's your system. I think the other thing for the extreme people who are like, look, there has been like this year has been a huge dislocation, right? Like there's been a lot of software engineers let go from like Airbnb and Uber, and like, yeah, they're going to flood the market, and like, yes, they're going to get hired over you sometimes if you're competing for the same job. And that's a temporary thing. That's a temporary dislocation, because the truth is there's been more demand for software than ever in the history of humanity. And by most accounts, like the amount of digitization has gone, like there's been 10 years of digitization that's happened over the past like 3 to 4 months. So these are good things macro wise. It means that you eventually have a job. I like some people, you know, stay unemployed for over a year, and I don't like that. I don't encourage that. Like for me, if like I was struggling to find a job above 3 to 4 months, then I'd be applying to tech adjacent jobs, like support engineer, like people like where you're not paid to code technically, but it's a bonus if you can code. And then you can move laterally once you're in the company, because nobody objects to you just picking up some work while you're inside. So it's much better than like staying unemployed for a whole year and then trying to get in the front door. Like if they don't let you in the front door, you know, you go around the back. And it's a ridiculous double standard. Like internal transfers are much easier than sort of straightforward interviewing, but it's a reality of life, and you should exploit it if you're having trouble. I think most people should be fine here. This advice is actually something I give to more international students, where their own economies might not be as strong. But I know the US sort of tech ecosystem well enough that I don't think you'll need that. But it's there. It's there if you need it.
Wow, that's a great answer. That's one of the things that, yeah, like having that perspective that, hey, like, you know, because of social distancing, because so many things are actually moving online, the fact that we're even doing this over Zoom is because everything is digitized. there's going to be this need for more and more software. And in the long term, the macro is really good. That's something that I think not a lot of people, I haven't heard that myself. And so I want to thank you for kind of that perspective. Even though, I have an econ degree actually in the background in some of this stuff.
There
So
you go.
but I haven't thought about it in quite those terms. One of the things that for me, I'm kind of like hijacking this with my thinking now, but is looking at the past to kind of predict the future is sometimes not a good thing. Just like looking at the dot-com bust or other kind of recessions may not be the best way to predict what will happen, just because there are particulars of what's going on right now that will really accelerate just some of these trends. But all right, cool. So we've got a question from Joel. He says, while learning in public, how do we not let the appreciation make one feel swayed or complacent and feel rewarded early on? Is it difficult to stay true to the long-term target? So I guess like if you get like some pats on the back really early, how do you kind of let that? How do you not let that get to your head? Is that right, Joel? Did I rephrase that correctly?
Yeah. I think it reads like you got it right. I don't know. I don't get that. Yeah. It's a good thing if you get that much appreciation. Most of the time you just get ignored. So I'm used to telling people it's fine to get ignored, but this is a new question for me. I never answered this. I don't know. So like, okay, so for me, like I kind of am my biggest critic. Like I don't love the work that I put out. Like I'm always like, I know the flaws, and even though like, like I put out my book and then like people say it's a great book, like I know there's a bunch of shit that I'm not happy about in it. So if you if you are your own biggest critic, two things will happen. One is you don't let the appreciation get to you because you know you can do better. And two is if someone else comes and criticizes you, they'll probably not be as critical as you can be to yourself. If you're really being honest. So I'm actually like, I can feel like that is like, not like nothing can faze me. No one can criticize me more than I can criticize myself. So maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe that's something that you'll have to come up with your own answer to. But I haven't had that problem. The question about being difficult to stay true to long-term target. Yeah, you should try to have some sort of overarching focus that you're trying to specialize on, because the returns to specializing is really good. Because if you just be a generalist, then you're just doing a bunch of tutorials and hello worlds all the time. Whereas if you try to specialize, you not only learn the thing, you also learn how to be an expert, how to get past that hump of like stuff that everyone knows into the stuff that everyone doesn't like to talk about, into the stuff that everyone doesn't know, and you kind of push past the stuff, all the tacit knowledge there. Okay. Andrew says, I'm hesitant to make projects public because I'm afraid that my code is subpar. Is it okay, project? Yes. Straight answer is yes. Go on to Hacker News. Straight up, like go on to Hacker News. Okay. Let me show you actually. I'm going to share my screen. There's a really good discussion about this, or a side project suck. Or it's okay for your open source library to be a bit shitty. 650 upvotes because like everyone understands like their code isn't that great either. You should like obviously like the guy said from Google, like you should try to have something that you can show off as like as reflective of the quality that you can perform to if you really need to. But other times other priorities override, for example shipping and keeping to a deadline and having some closure so that you can move on to the next thing. If you try to perfect everything to the last mile, it's actually very inefficient. So yeah, it's fine. Blog site, build your own or use a hosted site. Either. Just right. Just don't be the guy with like, the joke is that people, developers, they'll spend like 3 months engineering their blog site, and then they'll write a like, hello, welcome to this blog post. The second post will be how I built this blog. And then the third post will be, sorry, I haven't posted in a while. And then that's it. The best feature of any blog is content, is the stuff you write. Doesn't matter what the stack is.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so there's another question, and then let's do this one, and then we'll go to Samson for his demo, and then we'll go to Jason, and then we'll go back to questions. How about that?
You mean the Alistair thing?
Yeah, so let's go Alistair, and then Samson, you do demo, and then Jason, you'll do your demo, and then we'll come back to questions after both of them have demo.
Yeah. Hey, Alistair. We did not cover this because it's a kind of a niche tactic in my view. Like as central as Twitter is to a lot of people, it's even not central at all to actually the majority of developers. So you should plan on being successful even without Twitter, and Twitter is just like a plus. Obviously, Twitter is greatly helpful for those who want to participate, but it can be a bit of a time suck as well. The right approach. I don't know the right approach. I mean, I just so okay. So the way I kind of view this is that I'm not on Twitter to maximize followers. That's a really shitty game, and that's a race towards the lowest common denominator that will suck you towards clickbait and beginnery content. And yeah, it's just not great. My goal is to take form relationships that I can take offline. The relationship that I have with Phil, like he found me through Twitter or whatever, and then we took it offline to here, like offline as in air quotes, right?
Yeah.
Like off
no
Twitter.
longer on Twitter, I know.
But yeah, like same thing. Like I one of my early mentors was Dan Abramov from the React team, and he found the stuff I was talking with him about useful, and then he helped. He made me one of the moderators of the React Reddit, and then he helped me become a React contributor, and then helped me plan my first ever React conference talk and all that. You take it offline, like have that goal that you're on there to make professional relationships that you might eventually sort of work on something with, or like my current boss, like the person who hired me at AWS, knew about me for 2 years prior to hiring me. So there was no interview. He was just like, I'm gonna vote yes no matter what, because there's nothing to interview. Like there's nothing you can fake that will like an interview is just like a way of de-risking someone that you don't know. But if you already know that person, then it's great. So like networking, be real, talk about the most interesting things, try to be focused. A lot of people try to bring their whole self, they'll talk politics, music, food, whatever. That can be a bit distracting, especially if you're new and nobody knows who you are. So I tend to advise people, if you don't have a strong opinion, go 90% professional, focus on the topic that you're learning, and try to interact with people based on like their questions, but then also put out interesting questions of your own or projects of your own and all that. Summaries is very helpful. Like if someone does a talk, does a big blog post, you'll see people do summaries, and then they'll get reshared by the speaker or the writer, and that's a very good way to get initial traction. And this is all under the category of pick up what they put down. If someone has something new that has been put out, the default state of most of humanity is just to be lazy, or they have their own shit going on. They're not gonna pick up. But anything new is likely to be most in need of feedback. And if you give them that feedback that they need, like go through the docs, go through the demo, use the new library or whatever, then they're almost obliged to give you that feedback. And if you do this often enough, then you become a constant collaborator with them on their projects, and then they become your mentors, and then they become your friends, and so on and so forth. Like that's how networking works. Like you have this sort of constant mutual exchange of value. So I think, yeah, I mean, I always generally view that like the goal of Twitter. So the other thing about Twitter is that towards the higher follow accounts, like one of the reasons you don't want to maximize followers is that Twitter becomes unusable.
Hey, Shawn, can we actually go to Samson? I think he's got to go in a couple of minutes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I'll talk after.
Okay.
Sorry.
Hey, Samson, if you want to give a quick demo right now, let's do that. I know we're going to be cognizant of time, and then we'll finish the topic. I will have a lot of chance to talk about Twitter.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Shawn, for everything. This has been really amazing. To hear all your advice. So I can maybe stay like a couple minutes late.
Okay.
But yeah, wait, oops. So let me share screen. Okay, so this is something I've been working on for a while. I demoed it on like the first week that I was in the program, like a very early version. And my goal was launching yesterday. It's funny, it was actually like an issue with like Amplify, because all this uses like Amplify and AWS as a backend, but I had to change like the ACL of like an S3 object, and I couldn't figure out how to do it with Amplify. So I had to like learn like the SDK. But that was like the last big thing that got implemented yesterday, and then today I like built out like a quick landing page. So yeah, so I guess I can explain a little bit. So it's a project tracker. Let me log out really quickly actually, so it'll show that. So it's a project tracker, and the impetus for this was like have like build in public right here, right? So it's like this. It's about all about this mindset of like keeping track of your work, whether you're going to post it publicly directly or you're going to save it and write in a blog post or something. I've just found like, so I've kept like my Twitter is full of just like a bunch of updates of just like screenshots of code and like random things that I've learned, which clutters up a little bit, you know, like some of it I'll go back and be like, like maybe it would have been better to like save it for a bigger update or something. And other than that, for like bigger personal projects where it was just like, I just wanted to like write down like rapidly, like learning. I know for like D3, when I was learning that, I was writing down all sorts of stuff, and I just kept like a big like markdown document, and it worked. But I committed it into the repository, and it was just like kind of a jank system. So at first, this was like just for me to build for myself. I was like, I need a good way to keep track of projects. So I built this thing, and then learned. This is also my first like web app. I've done a lot of like static stuff before. But this is my first time using like React and AWS and Amplify for the most part. It was just like really amazing. Yeah. So, okay. So I'll log in and like kind of demo it. So yeah, I'm kind of proud of this like login interface as well. I like rebuilt it a few days ago. But use Google account. Oh no.
Localhost.
Oh, it's on, wait, what? Hang on, I'll go to the live website. Maybe that'll help. Oh no, it redirects. I see what it's doing. This is a problem. It redirects to localhost. Okay, so this is not ready for launch yet, but good thing I have an account that is not a Google account that I can demo with. And LastPass does not have the password saved either, so we'll go to our test account that has a very weak password. Okay. Everything goes wrong in the demo, but it's okay. Yeah, so this is what it looks like, and then I can make a new project, right? SOS demo. So do that, and then I didn't set a description because I'm kind of proud of like having this text here. I think it looks kind of nice, but so I can like set a description. I can make this project public, and now if I click into this link, it's here. And if I make a new update now, I can insert emoji, and then just make this public. I can even create and upload to Twitter. So if I hit that, it'll create it. And then, oh yeah, there's a problem with this that I also did not fix. But if I do this, it redirects to Twitter, and so I guess emoji's not working perfectly, but it'll have the message, it'll link to it if you have an update that's like more than 280 characters. So that's kind of the use case, is you can really quickly just write out your thing and post it. That'll show up here, and if I go on the public page, it'll show up here. And so yeah, so this is just a way of like, you can keep track of your own things, you can like make individual updates public or not, right? I can make this private and it'll disappear. Yeah, it'll be gone. I can add an image to this. Let's see if I have any. Oh yeah, that's nice. Okay. So I can upload an image, and file pond is nice and pretty. So it does that, and hit save. It'll save on here. And if I go to the public project, oh, this is not public right now, but I make this public and go here. It'll show up with the image, and this is right here, right? Yeah, and so I've actually been I've been using this somewhat like pretty extensively almost, right? So I have like, if I could log into my actual account, which has like LastPass password that I guess is binded to the local host and not to the actual URL. But I use it to I track the development of the project tracker with the project tracker, which resulted in some data errors that I had to manually fix on API calls were not properly written in development. I use it to track the thing on the homepage is an actual project, right? It was a binary classifier I was building for an ML project, and it was just really useful to keep track of okay, this is exactly how much data I'm throwing out. And I didn't have to keep a doc or anything. I would just hit new update and throw in whatever I wanted to, and it would be there. And it's been something really helpful for me. Yeah, so I kind of bill it as FLS project tracking, project learning anything logs. It's dev logs is I guess a common use case, but for me just even for some just learning and customer discovery interviews, I'm all right, I'm gonna jot down some notes. I'm just gonna hit this button and throw it in there. So yes, this has been a tool that's just been really useful for me. And I guess when I get it, all right, good thing it says V0, I guess. I'll put this when this is when I've ironed some bugs out. Hopefully you guys can sign up and use it if you find this useful. Yeet.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Samson. Let's give him a round of applause. And I particularly think it's kind of funny, or maybe not funny, but maybe it just shows the dominance of these things. But he's using Amplify and Netlify. These are both things that Shawn has a lot of experience with and firsthand knowledge about. So it's kind of amusing to me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. AWS and Amplify have definitely been huge components, enablers of this. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Samson. And next, I guess we will turn to Jason. So Jason, if you've got your demo ready, we will be all ears.
All right. Let me share my screen.
Perfect.
All right, so hopefully you can see a terminal.
Yep.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'm making a programming language. It's stack-based, and it's statically typed. So here I have a really small program that shouldn't type check. It shouldn't even try to run it. And before, if you try to run this, you would get a stack trace, which isn't very user-friendly. So I've improved the error messages. Just use the source for it. Now we get just the location of the error, what the error is, and even prints the line in the file with a caret for the location, which is slightly better than all this junk that would be irrelevant to most people.
Totally. That's awesome. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, what was it? I think it was Elm, where I can't remember, Evan, his name, he was talking about how the compiler should be really nice to you. And this is actually a really cool feature to be able to see, hey, this is now, instead of this nasty error message, you get something that actually helps you along. So that's actually a really cool piece of progress to share this week.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for sharing that, Jason. And let's give him a round of applause for sharing his progress. Alrighty, and with that, we will turn it back to Shawn and kind of just questions, if anyone has questions, and we'll pick up where we left off. So thank you.
You got one more demo.
Oh, got one more demo. Okay. Yeah, Theodora, go ahead. Okay, well, we got two more. All right, so we'll do Theodora, and then we'll go to Ken.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so I'm working on the calendar part of my application. I was working on the validation a lot because when you're adding, okay, sorry, now it's compiling, sorry. Because you know, when you're adding in a calendar, you have a start date and an end date. So some user might put the end date before the start date. So that's like one of the validations that I worked on. It's gonna start in a second. And on the front page, I said it will be very useful if the student is going to be able to see what's next for him in the next week. So I did that today as well. I'm logging now. Okay. I hope it's not the wrong password now in the demo. Sorry for the emulator, they work pretty slow.
It's all good. There needs to be like a demo feature where it's like, okay, this is a demo login, and so
yeah, so please run very, very fast.
Regardless of what happens, just go to just log in.
Of course, it's very slow. I'm really sorry. I just started the Visual Studio really late.
No worries.
So yeah, on the phone, because I have an APK, it works almost instantly. I can't believe it what a big difference is between an emulator and the actual phone. Okay, good. Okay, so I have the calendar over here. Now the events, you can select colors to them. So I'm gonna add an event which is going to be in the next 7 days. It's going to be the 14th. I'm gonna give it the name SOS. Let's say 6:30. Add blue. I'm gonna save it. It's there. And now if I go into my account, it's gonna be shown in the home main page. Now, if I add one later than a week in front, let's say we have a maths test, and this is going to be red. I'm gonna save it. It's there, but it's not gonna be shown in the events list on the homepage. I think that's something useful when you're in college and you have exams or projects that needs to be done to have a little bit of upfront. Everything else is still the same. I'm just working on the calendar at the moment. Okay, that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Theodora. We've actually watched kind of Theodora slowly build up her app. Maybe not quite. It's like once every 2 weeks she'll give an update or a demo, and so it's super cool to see. Like at the very beginning she was struggling with the calendar integration, and then now it's like this is something that you can actually use to track all your classes, which is that was kind of the dream, and you've got it right here. All right. So let's give her a round of applause if we haven't already. We've got the claps. Yep. And I think there was one more demo. Is that right? I might have. Yeah. Okay, Ken, when you're ready, take it away. All right, Ken, I think you're on mute.
Hello?
Yep.
All right. Screen good?
Yep.
All right. So this is the first demo for project app for Pearish. I'm just going to give a small shout out to Avi, who's here too. He helped me. He's one of my team members. So what the project idea for this app was basically like a digital pantry kind of app. So you scan an app, and you scan a receipt, and it automatically pulls your food items, loads into a database, and stores it. So the original idea was to maybe track expiry dates. Maybe when you go to the grocery store, you can possibly think back to say, oh, I don't know how many oranges I have at home or how much milk I have left at home, for example. And the idea is to help you make better choices. Maybe you don't overbuy, and also keep track of your food at home, because you don't want to go back and say like your food's gone bad. So here I have a sample image receipt that we're going to be referencing here. Basically, I'm just going to run my script, and after a lot of pain and effort, I actually have the output right here. So basically, if I put it on the side right here, we were able to use OCR to scan this entire image, convert all the text into actual words, compare it to an actual food database, and print out relevant stuff that's useful for us.
So
that's the entire demo.
That's awesome. How I remember I saw some updates on Twitter that you guys were trying to hook up all the pieces. What part was the most like difficult in terms of the one that gave you the most like want to pull your hair out? Because I think I saw a couple.
It's still going on right now. So we've only done like the most, I guess, the initial step. So the first problem we ran into was word recognition. So that was a pain in the butt. Then after we recognized words, how did we filter the words? So even though we got all these words, how do we compare it to our database of words? And even then, we had to compare, we had to shrink like a 10,000 line Excel file to maybe like 2,000 lines, for example. And even then, there were duplicates. How do we get rid of duplicates? So it was always one problem became like 10 different problems. So it's a never-ending nightmare. So we've only done like the initial logic portion. We're still trying to do the back-end stuff, the database stuff, and also the front-end stuff. So kind of a long way ahead, but we're still going to try to aim for the end of the month.
Sweet. All right. Well, I'm very, very excited to see. I think this is our first peer look into, is it Pearish? Is that the name of the team?
That's the name of the app, yes.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to see this progress and see you guys progress. This is actually really exciting. All right, everybody, let's give Ken and Team Pearish a big round of applause. Singular versus plural. That sounds, I don't even know how to even really solve that problem. All righty, and with that, let's turn it back into Q&A. Turn it back into, let's go Pearish. Let's turn it back to Shawn and see if there are any questions. I think we were just talking about Twitter, and so I have a few questions on Twitter as well, so we can kind of pick up where we left off. Or if anybody wants to ask, go ahead, the chat is open. And in terms of time, Shawn, how are you with time? Can you go for probably another 15 minutes?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, cool. So let's do that, at least another 15 minutes, and then we'll check in with everybody.
Well, so first off, like really impressive projects, and I mean, like I don't know how long you guys have been working on this, but really kudos, and these will be great to show off, and hopefully you're enjoying the process as well. Like this is awesome. I don't think I worked on anything this cool. So where were we at? Like, why don't you give me something to work with? Like, what's the question that you have?
So I think one of the questions that we were just talking about was one question is like, do you need to be on Twitter? Do you have to be on Twitter? And that was one thing. And I think the last thing that you were talking about right when we transitioned to demos was when you want to potentially get the attention of somebody who's senior, what you can do is kind of comment on their stuff as soon as it comes out. When it's fresh, you can comment on it, and that's potentially the best time. So maybe finish up that thought, and then I'll go dig into my bag of questions for the next one.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems like the entire thought. It really is not that hard to pick up what people put down, and to be honest, I feel like an idiot, like just repeating this, because it's really that simple. And you just got to put in the work to do it. Do you have to be on Twitter? You don't, but it can be enormously helpful. Therefore, you kind of owe it to yourself to try. And if you really don't like it, then fine. But at least you've tried, But the majority, like I said, there were like 40 or 50 million developers. Maybe 1 to 2 million of them are on Twitter. So like the vast majority are not. So it's fine. It's just that like you get a lot of the sort of social, like the social centers are there. And then everyone else is kind of like, concentric circles out from there. The way that where everyone gathers is you watch the major conferences in whatever industry you're in, whatever conference you're in. Where do people want to get want you to get in touch with them? Usually it takes people drop their Twitters on their first slide. Like it is that strong of a social network for us, and that's just is what it is. No, I don't have a hard copy on the book on my on Amazon, mainly because I'm still updating it. I intend to update it for a full year, so V2 maybe will have a hardcover, but it just doesn't make sense to have a hardcover right now. And then one thing I was gonna say was there's this general idea of like being helpful on the internet. wins you a lot of friends, and I think that's very helpful, especially if like you've done some work into like curating and making it look nice for people. So there's a lot so there's this guy Steve Sugar. He does like design tips on Twitter, and let me just like drop some of his work on you guys so that you can figure out what he's all about. Steve Sugar, where's his fire stuff?
Refactoring UI isn't that
That's
what he
his
makes?
book. That's his book. He spent 2 years dropping design hints on Twitter before he sold the book. By the way, the book has made 2 million.
Wow.
But I mean, the developers really love to buy design stuff and then never use it.
Yeah.
So it's really an awesome racket to get into. Designer.
I know I'm a couple of those dollars, but I actually used it. So
good. Okay, I'm gonna post it in the. Actually, you know what? I don't have. I have trouble posting. Okay, yeah. So, Rob Hope, like people have like just like design tips, and if you like, you know, work a little bit more than others to like put in these design tips, and people can really spread them for you, and that's a really helpful way to build your brand, and then also you know, get a network. And I think so I think I was building up to it towards this before we broke. You don't want to you know look at the replies of people with like more than 100,000 followers. Twitter becomes unusable for them, and that's actually something that I kind of don't want to go towards. Like, you don't want to make this a game of maximizing sheer breadth. You just want to connect with the people that you want to work with. That's it. And then a secondary thing is it would be nice to be taken seriously the first time anything happens. So the way you get taken seriously is you achieve something non-trivial. And part of that can be your job title, right? And you know, like, okay, CTO at GitHub, sure, good. But like, apart from that, like, if you have some level of following on Twitter, like you probably, like, if you did not buy them, which most people don't, but it's possible. If you have some level of following on Twitter, like people understand that you know how to conduct yourself in public, and that you have a reputation at stake. Like, for example, people know that I won't screw them over because they can just go complain about me on Twitter. So like, I value my own reputation more than any individual interaction, which makes people trust me more in every interaction. Having stakes helps to solve the stranger problem on the internet.
Sweet. And I guess like one kind of question that I think a lot of people here have, like, so I've actually been encouraging a lot of people to get on Twitter this summer just to kind of try it out and see you know, how it works for them. We've had some good successes already, but a lot of people are still figuring it out. And so for those people who currently have maybe 2 followers, myself and the SOS account, which is also myself, who, like, how do they kind of get started when you're starting from absolute ground zero and getting on Twitter and just kind of, you know, making, like, maybe getting a few more eyeballs on what you're doing? Is that any thoughts or advice for people who are at ground zero or just making this Twitter account today?
Advice? Yeah, I don't know. Just like, have a nice, like, you know, I talk about a lot of these in I'll be honest, like, this was a while ago for me, so I can't relate from like the complete zero. But you know, I think being like, following the major you know, sort of accounts in your sort of interest area, and then just replying on like enough topics will get you an initial following, like your first couple hundred, you know. And I think you start from there, and it's always, you build it piece by piece, and then a lot of it can be an outlet. Like, the way that you scale that is that you have something off the site, like your blog, and then people you know, find that and can constantly reshare it because it's good, and that scales, you know, from a one-on-one interaction to a one-to-many interaction, and I think that's good enough.
Totally. Yeah. It's one of the, like, I think you mentioned that, like, you know, for like, there's a lot of content out there for developers who are maybe just starting off or whatever. And it can be kind of tricky for people to kind of remember back down to like a certain point in time. I think it's it's definitely an interesting place. I've seen a lot of people who get started on Twitter and they just kind of blow up overnight. I know a lot of other people who have like a multi-year kind of grind, and then something things start clicking all of a sudden, and boom, everything's working again. But I've seen both of those happen, and sometimes you don't even need that many followers to have it work in your benefit.
Yeah.
So that's that one. And I've got one question that I've got over here is so Shawn, you're probably best known for a lot of your work in front end communities, React, maybe Vue, Svelte, Netlify, etc. And so how did you choose to specialize kind of in front end as opposed to somewhere else? And so that's kind of the first part of the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I was more conscious about it. I basically, I think most of the time when you go through a boot camp, you learn it's pretty front end heavy, and then you learn a bit of back end to be self-sufficient. But I pretty much just did what Free Code Camp and Full Stack Academy, the bootcamp that I went to, told me to do, and they biased me towards front end already. So that was already pretty strong. I was pretty interested in mobile, so I tried React Native, but Xcode is a piece of shit. So I decided that life is too short for Xcode, and I went back to the browser. So that's kind of where I'm at. So before this, I've done some number crunching with Python in Haskell. I just found that that's not so interesting to me. I like to see products that people can use, and that means shaping the actual UX and UI, which biases you towards front end. And that's just it. I didn't really think about it that much more. I'm definitely moving back in terms of the stack towards more cloudy stuff. I think I want to be better at hosting my own backends and stuff. So that's a big motivation for joining AWS, which is now I have an employee account. I can just go nuts on building whatever, and that's great. So might as well be paid to learn. And I think, that's just my interest right now.
Gotcha. One follow-up I kind of had to that is, do you think there's maybe a correlation between potentially learning in public and working on front-end tech? Maybe because front-end is more visual and a lot of visual stuff does really well on social media. Is there some sort of correlation there?
I think there's a bit, because like you said, it's more visual, and visual does perform better in public. But like I told you, the idea that I got, I got the idea of learning in public from Kelsey Hightower, who works in Kubernetes, which is the most abstract backend thing you can imagine. It's not exclusive to front end.
Totally. All right.
Is there a reason you don't like the T employee concept? Earlier you mentioned you didn't like.
Yeah, I don't think it helps. You can't just set out and say today I'm going to be a T employee, and then that doesn't help you make any decisions whatsoever. Yeah. You try to specialize, and then you're going to end up generalizing because you have to, and then you end up roughly T-shaped. And then some people like Scott Adams like to call it the pie-shaped pie employee, have two specialties, and then when you have two specialties, you have the intersection of the two specialties, and that's where you're the global unique best at. The problem with that is that most people, when you actually analyze people who are pie-shaped, they already started out with those advantages in the first place. So it's not something where you consciously mold yourself. You just find it in yourself as you sort of build your journey. And then there's other people who talk about comb-shaped, just have multiple different specialties. The problem in all of these discussions is that you don't have any trade-offs in all of them. You're just okay, have a bit of this and have a bit of that. Everyone wants to have their cake and eat it too. I don't think it's a really helpful discussion to talk about things with no trade-offs, and then just just specialize in everything. Who cares? The trade-off, I think, so in my discussion about specialists versus generalists in the book, I try to push it towards something more intelligent, where okay, if in doubt, specialize, but understand that you're going to have to generalize when duty calls.
That's awesome. I have one more question if no one else does.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is just, you mentioned there was, I guess, some principles included in the book that you feel engineers should keep in mind? And without giving away too much of the book, is there one that, I don't know, you feel particularly would stand out with the crowd here?
Well, yeah, the Learning Public's the big one.
Okay.
I mean, the whole table of contents is available on the site. Let me just
pull it up.
I mean, you know, I think oh wow, there's so many typos. There's a typo here. I didn't really realize it. Yeah, writing is a principle. Like try to write down things. Like I actually tell people to cultivate a habit of high output, like writing. Like the only way you get good is you just write a lot. And the more notes you take, the more you remember, and the more you publish what you write, the more you have like a body of work that people can come on and find you and talk to you about and correct you and all that good stuff. Like there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of just like writing more. So I think I spent like 20 pages telling people to write more, which is kind of like, you know, self-demonstrating that fact. But you know, there's a lot of principles. These are my principles. You know, I make it very clear that, like, you know, I don't expect all of them to stick. You know, I think these are just ideas that people can choose to adopt or not. But I think it's a good idea to know what your principles are and to live by them and to share them openly, because they just become your sort of like guide, your sort of North Star for how you live your life and how you conduct your career. And I think having those actually just like gives you a lot more security in like whether what you're doing is right. So I just think it's important to have principles, and I've written down mine, and that's a start of a conversation and not the end.
Awesome. Hey everybody, we are now at the 30-minute mark. But oh yeah, I was going to say, if anybody has any questions, we can sneak some of them in for the next few minutes. So we've got one.
Yeah, contributing to React. So I have a talk that is linked from the docs. So that's my talk on how to become a React contributor and speaker. That's literally my first ever meetup talk that I shared my story about contributing to React. So check it out. What writing style storytelling do you prefer, find most effective? Quick, medium, long, all of them. All are good. Write more. Like, you know, do whatever fits the content that you have and the idea that you have. Yeah. You can also do like multiple versions of this, right? Like, so sometimes I'll have an idea, I'll tweet it out just to like try it on for size, and if it gets some traction, then I'll expand it more into a blog post. And then if the blog post does really well, I'll expand it more into a talk. And that's how I kind of develop some of my other content ideas as well, is to you know, market test it by increasingly larger forms of content. So the background for this one is React hooks. So this talk started out as a tweet, and then it got expanded into a blog post, and then the blog post got expanded into a talk, and now it's my best talk. So yeah, I think you should, you know, remix your existing content. There are always going to be people who come across it for the first time and wonder how you got there. The secret is that you've just been working on it for a while. Like everything I said today, if anything here that I said to you, you're wondering like how I came up with like that, or like, you know, or like how there's so much density of ideas, is just that I've workshopped this for, you know, 2 to 3 years. And you can do that too. And we'll both get better at this if we keep doing it for like the entirety of our careers. And I think someone who like has this introspection into how they're working, how they're planning their careers, is going to do better than someone who's not.
100%. All right, everybody. Well, we are now at the kind of the line in the sand that I kind of drew. If we have another question, maybe we can sneak that in. But I think that's actually a pretty good kind of pausing point for now, unless anybody's like, oh, I've really got to ask this one question. And I want to give a big thank you for Shawn for coming by and just like, dropping a bunch of wisdom and just sharing like all these ideas and things that like he said, he's been workshopping these ideas, and the density of stuff has been just very, very helpful. And I know like, yeah, we're getting a lot of thank yous right now in the chat, and I'm very, very appreciative of just being able to, tap into your brain for a little bit and being with us here at SOS. And one of the great ideas that you talked about is like having just a long-term, thinking about things in 40-year career, right?
Play infinite games. Yeah, play long-term games. Too many people play short-term games.
And kind of what, like, what I want to encourage people to think about, just, think about a lot of these things in the big term, long term. You can continuously improve ideas, can prove different things, and that'll just think long term. It'll pay off. But I think thank you, everybody. 100% agree with everybody's comments in the chat. Thank you so much, Shawn. I'm going to turn off the recording, and maybe we could just we'll just say our goodbyes after that. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me. Good luck and all the best.